when I look at things, like I have a lot of friends from a lot of different backgrounds, but with the pandemic, it seems like um, a lot of people have started thinking about our supply chain more. And it's really brought a lot of people to go, hey, I want to have a little more security. And regardless of what background you're from, or how you grew up, or what culture, or what religion you are, I think if a lot of people sat down and talked, they'd realize that they really have more in common than they do difference. And there's so much we can learn from everybody, you know?
Yes.
And I love that message, and just really encouraging people to get started. Just try, like you said, whether you have a balcony or whatever it is, and just kind of help each other and encourage each other, because it, it's hard. Like with COVID and the way the world has changed, and having small children and homeschooling. I don't know about you, but I get some criticism about homeschooling. Some people think it's great, some people think it's not. And that's hard too, mentally. How do you keep your spirits up? Like when you have a rough day, what do you do that like helps you go, I can do this and get through it?
You know, I think I honestly think that blogging about it has made me feel a lot more, like a lot less crazy, because I see so many other people like on Instagram and I listen to podcasts. So I hear people talking about these very things. And like, we don't really have a lot of friends who do this. And
Oh, okay.
so it's kind of, sometimes you feel like a weirdo. And I remember like the first time, like a month ago, when I first got like hate comments on my Instagram, that kind of was like a huge jab to my side, because it made me realize, like, if you're out there with homesteading and you're like public with it,
Yeah,
especially,
yeah,
you're gonna have people like the weirdos, the ones not just who think it's a little strange, but like you're gonna have the trolls who hate what you're doing telling
yeah,
you on your. And so I think I really benefit from being on social media. It's like one of those rare situations where social media is actually helpful, because I feel much less isolated, not only with
yeah,
COVID, and like we're all kind of in like limbo anyway because of COVID, but I feel much less isolated in this stage of life, because motherhood itself, especially homeschooling and being a stay-at-home mom and all that, and then homesteading on top of it, like you're just kind of isolated. It's an isolating
yeah,
lifestyle, and it wasn't that way 100 years ago, because you had communities of people who lived right near each other and they all helped each other out. But that's just not the way the world is now. So social media really helps me as long as I can, make the conscious decision to focus on the positive things and like talk to people like you and talk to other like-minded people, and just be willing to literally delete the messages and comments that are nasty. So that's really what helps me, I think.
yeah. You're right. There is it's so important, and there were I wish women would support each other and lift each other up more, than
Yes.
the way it's been for who knows how long, the past 50 years, maybe going back a little further, where they tear each other down and there's all that cattiness. Like, and I see it in other cultures, um, where they kind of really form a group and help each other and support each other. And it it is so important to have that human connection to keep you uplifted. And I'm kind of torn, because sometimes you see so much negative on social media, but the positive really does outweigh the negative when you get those great comments and you get encouragement. And even if you can inspire one or two people, like think of the difference you made in that person's life, that they
Yeah.
may have never started homesteading or growing a garden, or think that they could homeschool their own child. I mean, that just That's amazing. And
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. It really does. Building a community and having other people to talk to. And I do, as frustrated as I get with technology, I really love the ability that it gives us to reach out and connect with people that we would never have met, and learn so much from each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
awesome.
Absolutely. I think about that too, like with my podcast, because I was listening back to a few episodes that I did in the summer and like the early fall. And back then I was literally not really even talking to anyone in particular because I wasn't thinking anybody would really ever hear it. And so the audio quality isn't good. And, I kind of am just rambling and talking about all kinds of random stuff. But I think that I needed that. I needed to jump in and just start creating podcast episodes because I was literally thinking, I don't know who this is for. I don't know if anyone will ever hear this, but even if just like two people, even if two people are blessed by this, that's enough. And we have to think that way. And I think that that's what's so great about homesteading is that we're already thinking in terms of how can I pull in and focus on quality over quantity, because the whole culture is about quantity, 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 and consuming and buying more and making more money. And I think homesteaders as a whole are trying to pull in and be more focused on how to be mindful with their own little sphere. And so it's kind of the same thing with social media. That's what the block button is for. You block the things out of your life. You get rid of the clutter. You get rid of the stuff in your food supply that's killing you. It's
Yeah.
making conscious decisions and conscious efforts to make your life, because we only have one life. We got to make it the best it can be, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing with time. You think you have it, and then it goes by so quickly. So
Yes.
you mentioned health, and that is what the primary focus, which got me refocused on doing gardening and starting back into this a few years back before COVID. I really went in all in on the gardens. Um, so I'm a nurse, not working as a nurse. I'm staying home with my kids and got some health issues and homesteading and stuff. But have you noticed an impact on your health from before to now, where you're growing more of your own food and being more of a producer of your own things instead of a consumer?
That's an awesome question. Um, so I got this question a few months ago from someone just in a DM on Instagram, and I remember thinking through that question and going, you know, I feel like because I had a pregnancy in between starting homesteading and now,
Yeah.
I don't know for sure because, when you're pregnant, everything's out of whack. And I've been nursing all
Yeah.
this time and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's not like an abrupt difference. It's not like, oh, now that we're homesteading, I'm definitely so much better in all these ways. But the one thing I will say about that is that I'm so much more conscious of what I'm eating and where it came from. I can't eat something without thinking about that. And that's a good thing because now I'm no longer just thinking what sounds good. I think twice before I get any kind of convenience food or anything prepackaged, because I really, I'm so close to our food supply now, and I'm always thinking okay, what can we grow this year that we didn't grow last year? And what can we do, and this year is the first year we're going to actually do meat chickens and not just processing birds from our flock. We're going to actually buy, I think, probably meat chickens, and we'll also do a flock of maybe pecans just to see, pecan ducks, to see what that's like. And so now I'm always thinking, whenever we do buy food from the store, or
Mm-hmm.
when we buy meat from the store specifically, I'm always thinking, okay, how can we in the future not need to do this again? Because I'm
Right.
thinking about not only it's healthier to be growing our own meat, but it's better for the animals. I know exactly what kind of life they had.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, is that I'm always thinking about where the food came from and how I can, because I don't feel guilty about buying food from the store. I went through something in the fall where I was kind of like, oh, I feel guilty for going to the grocery store. And then I was like, wait a minute, no, I should not feel guilty for that. Like there are people 100 years ago who would be so thankful to have a Smith's or a, whatever to go and get their food. So I should not feel guilty about that. And I think that's a little bit of a danger with, people talking about homesteading, especially on social media, is you might see someone who's further along in their journey and you might
Right.
think like, oh, well, they're doing that. So what's wrong with me that I don't have my own beans that I grew in my garden? Like we all have we're in a different situation. So I try to make the conscious effort to just be like, okay, I'm not going to let guilt enter in to my mindset about the food that we have in our home. I should be thankful no matter what we have. But even in the midst of battling some of that and just being like, I'm just thankful that we have beans, even if they're from Walmart, even if they're not organic, like I'm thankful that we have them and I'm not going to worry about it. And so, but moving forward, when I think about next year's garden and next year's, meat, chicken, flock, I can think, okay, we ate a lot more chicken in the last year than I thought. So be prepared. Like, what am I going to stock my freezer with that we actually grew on our property? And it is such a process, it's such a process to plan. And then, depending on what climate you're in, like something might not do well, or like maybe your meat chickens got attacked by a predator, like stuff like that happens. So just getting more connected, it's such a process to get connected to your food. And I'm definitely much more connected to my food than I've ever been in my entire life.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. We, as a society, have lost our connection with where our food comes from. And I think, especially with everything that's going on with COVID, if you look at the stuff that's going on with the truckers and everything, like, I know we talked about this a little bit already, but like our food system is so fragile, and teaching the next generation, like it's so important to me to teach my kids where our food comes from and how important it is that those animals or what goes into growing our vegetables or fruits or whatever it is, what goes into that, and how it's different from maybe what you do buy at Walmart. But it is hard to not get caught up in that cycle of guilt because you like want to do everything. Oh my gosh, I could do better. I could do better. I could do this. I could do this. But it is overwhelming. And that's a really good point. I'm glad you made it because I found myself multiple times getting caught in that guilt cycle and going, oh no, I shouldn't be doing this, or I can't find this organically. And it's so hard to not get caught in that, but to be grateful that we do have that option, and it's okay to still get what we need from the store if we have to. But just be mindful about it, and do
Yeah.
what we can. And each time, each year, each season, try and do a little bit better. And just be okay with what we can do, because we try and take on too much
Yes.
a lot of the time, especially as moms. And sometimes just reminding each other and ourselves that it's okay to do what we can do.
Yeah.
And speaking of kids, how involved, I know your kids are so young. Your oldest is what, 5 or 6?
Yes, he's almost 6.
All right. So how involved is he with your homesteading and growing and your animals and stuff like that? I know he's so young, so it's kind of.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. He's the one who's the most involved out of the 3 of them.
Right.
So we have the oldest is almost 6, and then we have a 2-year-old, and the youngest is 7 months.
They're too young to do much.
Yeah, they're way too young to do much. I mean, if anything, I have to like keep my eye on them and like make sure they're not getting into the coop and doing all this stuff while I'm out there working.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I think things are obviously going to get easier with time, but our oldest, he will haul dirt for me sometimes. And, there have been times where he was really excited about gathering the eggs and stuff. And then I feel like at his age, his interest kind of waxes and wanes. Like he'll be excited about it like for a couple days, and then he just wants to play with trucks in the dirt, you know. And so I try to just let him lead it. Like if he's interested in it, absolutely, I'm going to let him help. But if he's not really, then it's like, well, you know, that's okay. He'll come back around to it. It's kind of like toys, you know, when your kids have a new toy, they're super into it, and then they're not into it anymore, like after a couple days, and then maybe they'll be into it again. And it's just in the ages that my kids are in, they're very fickle, you know. They can't decide what they're excited about.
Yeah, they're young, so I know that was kind of like the only one that could even be really involved is the oldest one. But looking into the future and with the kids and your family and your homestead, what are your plans? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And with the kids, and like, let's say one of your kids says, I don't want to do this. Or, you know, just how would you handle that? And kind of where do you see yourself over the next few years?
So one of the biggest goals that I have is that I really want to get good at gardening, because even though we're 2 years into homesteading, like the first year I focused mostly on animals and learning to process all kinds of different animals and what to do with, you know, feathers and bones and all these new things that I wasn't really.
They're so good for your garden.
What's that?
They're so good for your garden. Yes, the feathers and the bones. And gardening is my jam. That's my jam.
Yes. And I'm super new to gardening because I've been focused on other things for the last 2 years. And plus we live in New Mexico, and I had all these ideas that, you know, gardening would be really hard here. And it's not, it's different, but it's just, you have different challenges than other people have, right? So we don't have a lot of the bugs that other people have in other states, but we have drought and we have horrible soil and stuff like that. And so one of my biggest goals is to maximize what we can do in our climate and with our property, with gardening. And I kind of want to keep the livestock situation simple for a few years, even though I'm so tempted. I would love to have like a few dairy goats or something. That would just be wonderful. But I'm trying to kind of not get in over my head with the livestock situation. So, I mean, maybe in 5 years we would have a dairy goat. I mean, our oldest will be 10 by then, and our youngest would be like 5. So yeah, maybe, I don't know. But at least until then, I would like to, you know, spend the next like 5 summers getting a lot better at, you know, starting seeds indoors and, you know, learning how to do all these different plants in the garden and how to maximize our water usage. That's a huge goal. And I definitely want to be more intentional about, like, I think we're going to start doing at least 2 meat bird flocks, one in the spring and one in the fall. And we're going to try that out this year, and we'll see what happens. We'll see if it goes well. But I'm kind of thinking, and it's so easy to make these plans and then like later on, like I was planning on having quail and rabbits forever. And then one day last fall, I was like, no, we can't do quail and rabbits anymore. So I can say this now, and it may be totally different 6 months from now. But for now, my plan is to have like 2 batches of meat birds and get more intentional, like with preserving food, because I did not plan at all for not having eggs this winter. So we're back to buying eggs at the store because I didn't learn to pickle eggs, for example, or all of the things you can do with eggs. So I want to stock up for winter and make that a habit. And then maybe in 5 or so years, I think my thought process is that maybe our oldest will be old enough to choose something he wants to do on the homestead. Like if he wants to join 4-H and, I don't know, have goats or rabbits, and that's his project, then I would love to help him out with that. And then the thing you asked me, like, what would I say if my kids decided that they didn't like homesteading. I think if they decided that they just didn't like it, because I remember kind of having that thought process when I was a kid. Like I
Yeah.
remember a certain point where I just didn't want to ride horses anymore, and I didn't want to do the ranching thing anymore because I thought I was missing out. Like I thought with all these people living in the city and driving to their job a couple minutes away, like it can't be that bad living in the city if this many people do it. It's got to be fun or something. So I thought I
Right.
was missing out, and I remember having that thought process, like I don't want to do a rancher thing. I don't want to wear cowboy boots anymore. And so I think if they said that, if they just really didn't like it, then I would just be like, that's okay. Like, you don't have to do it. And if they decide later that, oh man, like I did, if they decide later, like, wow, my upbringing was so great and I didn't realize how good I had it, then I trust that homesteading will come back around, or the country life will come back around for them, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it like, I'm going to let them, I will expect them to do certain things to help, because that's just what you do when you're a parent. You know, you expect them to pull their weight, I guess, but there's a
Yeah.
certain point where if they're not into it, then that's okay, you know?
Yeah. No, that's, I think when you have multiple kids, sometimes it's hard to juggle. At least I've seen other families, and for me, it has been too. So just seeing how other parents kind of handle it, and, you know, saying, okay, here's the minimum that I expect. You live here, you know, but I'm not going to be too pushy is important. But just,
Yes.
I love getting, you know, other parents' perspective, and kind of seeing how everybody else kind of handles it, because, you know, everybody's different, and kids may not love the same thing you do. And
Yeah.
this lifestyle is definitely a different lifestyle from the quote unquote norm, you know?
Yes.
So, I
Yes.
mean, you grew up on a ranch. I grew up on a little homestead kind of area. So I think it does come back to you. So I think it's really good to, at minimum, teach our kids where their food comes from, and at least have those basic skills, you know? So
Yes.
I wish that they would really incorporate growing and stuff like that into mainstream schools a little bit more, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Because if you look at everything, that might be an important skill to have in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think people would probably be less afraid of starting this journey if they had even just a little bit of an inkling of what goes into it. Because I remember being so afraid. I think
Right.
the thing that I was the most afraid of was processing our own meat. I thought that would be just insurmountable. And I thought that I wouldn't be able to take it emotionally. Because like I'm the one who said, like, let's start a homestead. I'm not gonna be like, okay, now that it's time to butcher the animals, you're gonna do it, husband. Like I was like, no, I have to do it because it's my thing,
Yeah.
and it's up to me to do it, and it's okay, and I'm the one who wants to do this. And I cried a little, and that was hard,
Yeah.
but now I feel like it's just part of our life now, and I get it, and I appreciate our animals, and I'm not, I wish that more people, because people ask me a lot, like, how do you get past that initial feeling, like that it's emotional and it's hard? And I'm
Yeah.
like, you just have to do it. And people are like, I could never do it. And I'm like, yes, you can. Like, trust me, I thought I couldn't do it. But once I
Right.
did it, like, oh, okay, like this is what people have been doing for thousands of years. So if they could do it for thousands of years, we can too. It's just a part of life, really.
Yeah. Um, I didn't think I could either. And one thing I notice is I find myself really, when we eat meat, I find myself eating less meat and eating more stuff that we grow, like vegetables, and more of a plant-based diet. But we still eat meat, but really appreciating the meat that we do have. And really realizing how important it is how that animal was raised. You know, I mean, there's a
Absolutely.
huge difference. And I I honestly didn't even realize how bad it was until my son worked at an egg farm and came home telling me the stuff. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
And at that point we had chickens, and he would come over because he was 19 at that point and he had moved out and got a job and stuff. And he would come home and he's like, "Oh my gosh, mom, your chickens are so spoiled. You give them all this fresh food and they're so tame and they're so sweet and so amazing." And at the egg farms, they have a rooster and they just get rid of them right on the spot. And it's just really inhumane conditions. Not going to get, graphic, but really understanding like the life cycle and the process of what we put into our bodies and how that affects us. And it makes me feel better knowing that these animals had a good life. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, and teaching that to our kids, I think is important.
Oh
And
yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and it's easy to be out of sight, out of mind
yeah.
about like the food system and factory farms and stuff. But I feel like for me, like now that I've done the homesteading thing and I've started this journey, I
Yeah.
cannot unsee what I see in my mind because I haven't ever worked at an egg farm, but I can't unsee what I like. My whole mindset is totally different now. So now it's like, ugh, like I really don't want to support that. And in the past, before we were homesteading, it was easy for me to just be like, I know, but oh well,
Right.
that's just the way it is, you know. And now I can't not care.
Can't undo it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if one thing that you mentioned was your water situation with growing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, look into doing a core system.
Okay.
So it was how I was able to completely get rid of any irrigation system. I
Wow.
I'll have to send you a link to the book. I found it. It was actually on M.I. Gardner. He did a video on it. He's in Michigan, but he did a video on how you take like the middle of your garden, you dig it out really deep. I think it was 18 inches down, maybe a little bit more, but he did something called a core, and he puts like leaves and straw and compost, but lots of, and it acts like a candle wick, right? And like it absorbs all of the excess water when you have more water. And it that's how they do it in like the Sahara Desert or all of these like places in Africa where they can't grow stuff. But you might want to check that out because you're in New Mexico and you have that challenge.
Yeah.
I'll send you a link to the book,
Yeah.
but
I would
it
love
was
that.
really beneficial. I love, love, love it. And you can put, like I don't know what you use for bedding in your with around your chickens and your ducks, but you can take that once it's like a year old and put that in the middle there so it slowly releases the nutrients too. So like that might
Nice.
help you as far as that.
Wow. I am like
Thought I'd
so
mention it.
intrigued right now. That
I,
sounds amazing.
yeah, I should probably do a video on just that because it
Yeah.
was it was I mean, even like I don't know if you have trees around your area. So we would take and then there's a whole other thing called a hugelkultur. Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay, so hugelkultur is you dig deep down and you take a bunch of partially composting wood and you bury it really deep, and it kind of does the same thing. It's more the hugelkultur does it more in like the slowly releasing the nutrients. Um, not as much of the water kind of thing, because you bury it pretty deep because you don't want it to rob the nitrogen from the plants, and let it slowly compost over time. And then it turns into this beautiful black gold. But it's constantly, slowly releasing everything like 2 to 3 feet down under all your soil. But, your roots can grow down to get what they need and stuff like that. But there's so many things. There's so many things.
Yeah.
Definitely should look into putting a core in the middle of your gardens. You don't have to have a raised bed to do it. You can just put it right in the ground, just straight put in the ground. And yeah, kind of like a handle width for water. What's that?
And then then you just plant all your like stuff around it, and it just releases out to everything.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I know. I didn't even ever hear of it until he did that video a couple years ago. And I was constantly, I live in Ohio, so we have 4 seasons, and it goes from like super wet to crazy hot to super wet, like all over the place. And so I was spending so much time watering. As I can imagine you are in New Mexico trying to do a garden. And I was like, I don't have time for this. And like, I had teenagers living at home at the time, and I'm like, I can't do this. So I was like, he actually wrote a book that was, I'll have to post the link. It was basically how to garden without having to be so hands-on. And that was one of the main things that he did in that book. It was amazing. And so I put that in the middle of every single one of my gardens. I put a core.
How big is it?
So I would do about 10 inches across to about 8 to 12 inches deep.
Oh, okay.
Leaves, twigs, composting, a little bit of composting wood, coca core, if we had it extra, a lot of composted chicken bedding, like, because like we do straw, and then we let it compost. Lots and lots of leaves, lots of garden scraps, tons of leaves, tons of some of the bark, straw, like just a really good, thick, solid layer of all of that stuff. And then every year I just dig up the middle of that garden and kind of spread out the stuff from the year before, because it's compost. It's like this black gold. You know what I mean? That beautiful compost, right?
Right. Gorgeous. Yes.
Move it around into the top layer, because I try not to disturb it too much, because I don't till, because I don't want to disturb the worms and the life under the soil. But I just kind of take that middle out and kind of spread it out and then replace it. Sometimes at our old house, because we just moved here at the beginning of 2021, so I didn't really get a chance to put as many of them as I wanted. We did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So like this year, I probably won't dig them up. I'll just leave them.
Yeah.
But I can soak it really, really good and get it really wet. It'll absorb all the water, and I don't have to add any water other than what naturally comes from the sky. 2, 3, 4 weeks. Like,
wow.
It's game changing.
That is
definitely game changing. Yeah. So that might help you.
Try that.
Yeah.
That's going to be amazing. I cannot wait to try that. I feel like that's going to, like, no matter where you live, that's awesome. But especially like in New Mexico, because we are battling not only a lack of water, but like horrible soil. Our soil is just completely nutrient empty. Like, it's just got nothing to it unless you work on it. And it takes a long time. It takes like a few years to get it good. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. I can't wait to try that.
Have you looked into, I think his name's Joel Salatin. I'm not really good with the pronunciation, but like regenerative gardening or anything like that to
I have not. I've heard about it, and I see a lot of people posting stuff about it, but I haven't jumped into it and researched anything about it myself.
chickens are like, have you seen a chicken tractor?
Yes.
Okay. So just letting them, like you can do a chicken tractor, but just letting them kind of scratch the surface and deposit their, where you're going to do your garden. That can be really helpful, especially if you're nutrient deficient. So
Okay. So how do you keep your chickens from just eating everything?
destroying your garden.
Doing what?
Destroying your garden.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in my experience, this year we just bought this property. I did raised beds for the gardens we did this year. And I still struggled to keep them out of there. Fences. And so with your birds, do you have them fenced in an area or you just kind of let them free range?
So they're free ranging. I just started free ranging last fall because I've heard so much great stuff about it, obviously, and I saw so many homesteaders doing it, and I was like, maybe it's possible for us, because I was really worried about predators. But we have them free ranging, and right now they are allowed in the area that is going to be the garden. But they're so used to going down there, and I'm kind of like, oh, it's going to be really hard to keep them out of there once we actually have stuff that they can eat.
Yeah. So that's what we did at our old house. Before I put in new gardens, like I'd let them have free range of everything. And then I put up an extra fence, and that's what I'm going to do this year is put up another fence. And instead of putting up a fence around where the chickens can go, like to contain them, I'm going to just put up a double fence around the garden. But then I also clip their wings, and I only clip them on one side.
Oh, okay.
Because that makes them uneven.
Yeah.
So if you clip them on one side, they can't really get the hang of trying to get over. And then doing a double fence kind of will prevent them from actually getting into your garden. That worked for us at the old house. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping it will work here. We have a lot more. We have like 300 birds at our house.
Oh, now. Wow.
It's a lot.
That's awesome.
It's ridiculous a lot.
Yeah.
But ducks, if you have ducks, they can't get over the fences like chickens can. And you said you like ducks. So you have kind of that going for you.
Yes.
But yeah, just some of the fences. And at least I found last year when we first moved in, allowing them to go anywhere they wanted on the property. And like our neighbors are so amazing. They don't care that they go on their land and stuff. And we have we're in a rural area. We get the neighbors free eggs. So they're happy.
Yes.
And then just having that little area that's fenced off, they will tend to stay out of, or the area like we had the raised beds, they will go the other places that are easier to get if they want. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then if you clip their wings, that helps deter them from.
Yes.
I hate clipping their wings, but
got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had to clip our Muscovy ducks' wings because they're like wild and they will just fly away. And
okay.
Yeah. So after I did that, I then read about the whole clipping with just one side idea, and I was like, oh, that's genius. So yeah, I'm probably going to be doing that because we have this one leghorn who always flies up into trees, and leghorns love to go up to high places and stuff. So she's like the prime candidate for destroying our garden. I can already feel it. And she's not even, I think she's probably going on 6 months old now. So She wasn't even around for last year's garden, but
Okay.
I can already tell she's going to be the one who wants to fly over the fence and get into everything.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always a couple troublemakers.
Yes, for sure.